Mulholland Drive, Mary Magdalene at the tomb. In the mid-'80s, some of us took a directing and acting class. Once a week, in a small, dilapidated theater on Cahuenga Boulevard, the Actors Forum, we performed scenes we were working on with other actors for the old Daniel Mann, a New York theater director who'd come to Hollywood in the early 50s to make movies. When it came to scene selection, he gave us total freedom. We could even bring our own material to the scene study class. At the time, I'd just seen Pasolini's The Gospel According to Matthew and wanted to try rehearsing as a scene for the stage a passage that only appeared in the Gospel of John. I approached some of the actors from my class. I wanted Tyler Wachowski as Jesus, Lauren Janes, whose real name was Sam Leffler, as Peter, John Newcomb as John, the other disciple whom Jesus loved, and a young Italian woman, Monica Esposito, who had just joined the class a week earlier, as Mary Magdalene. I'd made some photocopies of the passage, John 20:1-18, Mary Magdalene at the tomb, and handed them out to the actors. We went to Candy's, an all-night coffee shop next to the Ventura Freeway and just across from our theater, to set rehearsal times and exchange phone numbers. Okay, I must admit, Newcomb and Leffler were a bit taken aback when I suggested the scene, but first of all, they'd had a lot of fun when I directed a short story by Charles Bukowski, The Killers, with them in the lead roles, which also went down well with Danny Mann. And secondly, they certainly agreed to do it because of Monica Esposito, the exotic Italian girl who left us all a bit speechless and who, it seemed, was the only one to immediately show interest in working on the scene, which then sparked the others' desire to join in. Tyler Wachowski wasn't exactly the great unknown amateur that Pasolini had found for his Jesus, but Tyler had a 3/4-inch video camera. We often recorded the rehearsal scenes, which he would bring along when he got roles. Plus, Tyler always had access to the best locations where we could rehearse and tape undisturbed. Rehearsals for the class weren't allowed in the theater, and meeting at people's homes, especially if they were married or in relationships, often led to logistical or personal issues. But Tyler always had a solution. His brother was a real estate agent. Tyler, come on, where are we rehearsing tomorrow? Tyler dragged it out, adding a bit of suspense, probably because of Monica Esposito. But then he pretended he just remembered he had keys to a house on Mulholland Drive, a house that he, as a favor to his brother, had shown to potential buyers just yesterday. He said the house was empty and, at least for this week, would be the perfect place for our rehearsals. Mulholland Drive, winding along the crest of the Santa Monica Mountains from east to west, forms a defining divide in Los Angeles. For all of us, it was roughly in the middle. Tyler and Newcomb, who lived in Hollywood, had about the same distance to the ridge as Leffler and I, who came from the valley. Tyler rummaged through his pockets for the slip of paper with the Mulholland address, finally found it, and passed the crumpled thing around. It also had the security code we needed to get through the gate, while we exchanged phone numbers. Monica didn't give hers. She said she didn't have her own line yet. The first, meaning tomorrow, Saturday, 7 p.m., worked for everyone, they said, except for Monica. 8 p.m. was better. Okay, 8 p.m., we said. Tyler wanted to pick Monica up, which I didn't like at all, but she said she'd find her way there. She and her husband, we were all speechless when she suddenly mentioned her husband. Each of us found it unfucking believable. She was 22, 23, not a year older, probably younger. She and her husband, not fiance or uncle, she and her husband lived on Mulholland Drive, so she would have no trouble finding the address. A number of movie stars lived on Mulholland Drive: Jack Nicholson, Marlon Brando, Steven Spielberg, as well as entertainment lawyers and Hollywood agents. Tyler and I had the same thought, as we later confirmed. She's married to a producer and obviously can't be picked up at home, especially not by her actor colleagues. We ordered a few more carafes of red wine, something you could actually do at Candy's coffee shop. And Tyler, now in high spirits, started telling us about the house he was making available to us. The house, he said, had belonged to a magician in the 70s. Alongside standard tricks and some more elaborate ones with a personal, slightly eccentric touch, the magician had ended his career with an outrageous act, an enormous finale. Known for his charming and gallant manner, this magician had, as noticed by his audience during the first 3/4 of the show, Full House at Circle Square in Soho, New York, had treated his assistants that evening with unusual roughness, almost aggression. It was borderline scandalous. Some who knew it was his final performance got the impression this is the end, and the end had already changed him. Others assumed he'd always had this cruel streak, but was only now making no effort to hide it. He no longer cared what anyone thought. And then the man announced the next act, not as the final one. Most people didn't know that this would be the act that ended his career. He addressed the audience. What follows is not for the faint of heart. Anyone with a weak stomach or heart problems had better leave the theater now. The next act I'll be performing with my daughter. And you know what? I would never harm her. Then about a third of the audience actually left. The curtain rose, revealing a stage covered entirely in white. The assistants, also dressed in white, wore surgical masks. He too, shedding his black cloak, now wore a white coat and pulled a mask over his face. A chloroform-like scent spread through the theater, a hospital smell. And now, in the middle of the stage, stood a massive, gleaming circular saw. His daughter was strapped to a gurney by the assistants. He checked the straps, had an assistant dab his forehead for sweat. Then the daughter was wheeled toward the screaming saw, and he sawed her in half, down the length of her body. As he cut through her, blood and intestines splattered onto the first 2 rows. Supposedly it was animal entrails and animal blood. Only people who were in on the act were sitting there, which of course no one knew. People screamed. The theater was in turmoil. So he had cut the girl in 2 and rolled one half to one side of the stage, the other several steps away. With a wave of his hand, he had both halves, still lying on the severed wooden slabs, propped upright. He positioned them so the audience could clearly see the open, bleeding sides, the intestines, everything. Whoever wants to, he said to the audience, can come up and touch. And indeed, some did. They approached, touched what was there, and walked away pale-faced, fingers spread wide. Now he asked those who had come up to take their seats again. Everyone sat there utterly shocked, paralyzed. And now all eyes were on him. Then blackout. All the lights went out in a flash. Seconds later, they came back on. The stage was empty. The show was over. No restoration, Tyler said. He never put her back together, which, of course, was what people had been waiting for. The man never performed again after that. Can you imagine? They had to go home with that gruesome final image stuck in their heads, unable to shake it. Pretty unforgettable, Tyler said. They wanted him to tone it down, offered him a lot of money to take the act to other cities, but he refused to make the slightest compromise. Even though he really needed the money, he insisted on never performing again. We got up and left Candy's around 11 early because Monica said she was already expected at home. As I drove past her car in the parking lot, I saw her leaning her head against the steering wheel. It looked like she was crying. I stopped, got out, and saw Tyler's car coming up behind me. He grinned widely when he noticed I was heading toward Monica, gave a quick honk, and disappeared into the traffic on Cahuenga Boulevard. When I tapped on Monica's window, I realized I'd been wrong. The key had slipped from her hand, and she'd been searching for it on the floor. Still, she seemed grateful that I'd checked on her. We exchanged those wonderfully mundane questions, the kind of small talk that flows in America as readily as the thin coffee the waitresses keep refilling, which might mean nothing to them, but everything to those who just want to linger in the warmth a little longer. Are you okay? Yes, thanks, I'm fine. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure I'm okay. Because if you're not, no, I'm okay, I'm fine. Okay, fine, just thought I'd check. Thank you, that was nice of you. Are you okay? Me? Oh, I'm fine. I just thought, well, it looked like something was wrong. No, really, I'm fine now. I'm okay now. Oh, okay then. See you tomorrow. Yeah, see you tomorrow. I went back to my car, but didn't drive off right away. I waited until I saw her headlights come on, then started my car, watched as her sedan passed me in the rearview mirror, pulled out of the parking space, and only then decided to tail her a bit so as not to lose her immediately. She drove west on Ventura Boulevard. I'm heading in that direction anyway, I told myself. My apartment was in Sherman Oaks, and tried to shake off the uneasy feeling that I was watching this young woman without her knowledge. She hadn't been sad, after all. I'd been mistaken. So what had I imagined? Looking at it now, I had to admit that the jealous, dangerous, possibly violent producer husband she was afraid of was nothing more than a vague suspicion of fantasy I had invented to cast myself as her potential savior. She was driving slowly, I noticed, even though she had told us she was being expected at home. I had to keep braking to avoid getting too close. More than once, I considered pulling up alongside her at one of the red lights ahead, giving her a wave, and then driving on. At Laurel Canyon, I finally managed to get into the lane next to her and catch up. I glanced over and was startled by how troubled she looked, staring blankly ahead. So it wasn't just my imagination. What was going on? I waved at Monica, but she didn't see me. I could have turned right, but instead, as soon as she drove off, I slipped back into her lane. It was the slow glide across the white lane marker, staying just behind her, that reminded me of exactly those images from Vertigo. In this Hitchcock movie from the 50s, James Stewart, as John Scotty Ferguson, is hired to follow Kim Novak, to track her every move and report back to her husband. Her husband fears, so he tells Stewart, that she might harm herself. James Stewart shadows Kim Novak, who I now remembered was named Madeleine in Vertigo. Yes, of course, he follows her all the way to a grave. I recalled the dreamlike atmosphere of that small cemetery Stewart had followed her to. Everything was filmed through a fog filter, and Bernard Herrmann's music was floating over the scene like finest haze. Stewart follows Madeleine, but doesn't speak to her. He hides behind a cypress tree, watching. What grave is that she's standing before? She turns, walks past him, and leaves the cemetery garden. Stewart himself steps forward to read the headstone, whose name is on it. And why had Madeleine, the wife of his client, gone to that grave? I made sure not to appear next to Monica's car again. She drove on for a few more miles, then moved into the left lane, preparing to turn onto Coldwater Canyon. That was one of the canyon roads leading over the ridge and to Mulholland Drive. So she was going home after all. I tried to push away all other thoughts, but still I followed her into the turn lane. It must have been Tyler's story that I couldn't shake. I was startled when the magician's daughter, that torn apart, sawed in half girl, suddenly bore Monica's features. For a few seconds, I was so confused that I didn't notice the green light. The honking cars behind me snapped me back. Too late. Monica's sedan had turned, climbing into the hills. I saw it disappear. There was no way to track her now, not with the stream of traffic rolling after her. I drove back to my apartment, back to the text. Preparing for tomorrow's rehearsal would calm me down. I worked with the English King James translation of the passage, but for my preparation, I didn't go back to the photocopy I'd handed out. Instead, I looked it up again in a Diogenes paperback my sister had given me on one of my last visits to Germany. It contained the New Testament in 4 parallel columns: Latin, Greek, German, and English. I read the passage aloud, slowly, to visualize it. The first day of the week cometh Mary Magdalene early, when it was yet dark, unto the sepulchre, and seeth the stone taken away from the sepulchre. Then she runneth and cometh to Simon Peter and to the other disciple whom Jesus loved, and saith unto them, They have taken away the Lord out of the sepulchre, and we know not where they have laid him. Peter therefore went forth, and that other disciple, and came to the sepulchre. So they ran both together, and the other disciple did outrun Peter, and came first to the sepulchre. And he, stooping down and looking in, saw the linen clothes lying, yet went he not in. Then cometh Simon Peter following him, and went into the sepulchre, and seeth the linen clothes lie, and the napkin that was about his head, not lying with the linen clothes, but wrapped together in a place by itself. Then went in also that other disciple, which came first to the sepulchre, and he saw and believed. for as yet they knew not the scripture that he must rise again from the dead. Then the disciples went away again unto their home. But Mary stood without at the sepulchre, weeping. And as she wept, she stooped down and looked into the sepulchre, and seeth two angels in white, sitting, the one at the head and the other at the feet, where the body of Jesus had lain. And they say unto her, Woman, why weepest thou? She saith unto them, Because they have taken away my Lord, and I know not where they have laid him. And when she had thus said, she turned herself back and saw Jesus standing, and knew not that it was Jesus. Jesus saith unto her, Woman, why weepest thou? Whom seekest thou? She, supposing him to be the gardener, saith unto him, Sir, if thou have borne him hence, tell me where thou hast laid him, and I will take him away. Jesus saith unto her, Mary. She turned herself and saith unto him, Rabboni, which is to say, Master. Jesus saith unto her, Touch me not, for I am yet not ascended to my Father. But go to my brethren, and say unto them, I ascend unto my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God. Mary Magdalene came and told the disciples that she had seen the Lord, and that he had spoken these things unto her. This was the passage I had given to the actors. My first decision, why was I still under the impression of that drive, of my attempt to shadow Monica? My first decision was to focus the scene entirely on Mary Magdalene. John and Peter's race to the tomb would not be part of the rehearsal, not part of the scene. I would begin at verse 11. Mary Magdalene arrives at the tomb, weeping, stoops down and sees two angels where the body had been. Newcomb and Leffler wouldn't like that, but they would understand that Monica needed the questioners, the angels, who do not yet proclaim anything, only their question. Woman, why weepest thou? Besides, I realized I also wanted to leave out verses 17 and 18, leave them unperformed. The well-known ending of the scene, Jesus' admonition to Mary Magdalene not to touch him, would remain unstaged. All that mattered to me was, why was this so suddenly clear to me? Perhaps my driving behind her, following her every step, had influenced my decision here as well. All that mattered to me was the recognition itself. All that mattered were the steps, was each step that led up to that moment of recognition. At the time, I wouldn't have been able to explain why this moment fascinated me so much. Today, I would say that the essence of this scene, the essence of every recognition scene, follows the path of Orpheus. Recognition is the path to the grave, to something dead within us. It is the descent and the return to daylight. Recognition is the moment of one resurrecting in the other. Mary Magdalene's weeping reminded me then of the tears I thought I'd seen on Monica's face when I ran back to her car to check on her. It seemed possible, likely even, that I had seen those tears in Monica because I knew she would be playing Mary Magdalene. Or was it the other way round? Why had I chosen her of all people, an actress whose abilities I knew nothing about? She had entered the class after a personal conversation with Daniel Mann, but what, after all, did that mean? It said nothing about her talent. My thoughts kept circling back to the tears of this woman. Why did she return to the tomb? She already knew it was empty. She had already told the disciples about this. But one who mourns, thank God, rejects logic. Instead, mourning makes one retrace one's steps. Mourning always retraces its steps back to the place of loss. I understood this now. Here, something was lost. Here, one points to the ground, stands rooted to the spot, searches it, lingers there, weeps. Because if anything, one feels this without finding the words, if anything will change, it will happen here. The place of mourning, where she had lost the lost one, this Jesus. The place she insists on because she is searching for the body of her beloved, reminded me of the mention of a location in the Orpheus myth, that passage in Aornum in Thesprotis, where Orpheus began his descent into the underworld. It seemed to me that Mary Magdalene, with her tears, had already begun to dissolve the hard, concrete reality of the tomb, the harsh, unresolved nature of the death and disappearance of her beloved. The music of Orpheus, which dissolves resistance and moves the gods, found its counterpart in the tears of this woman, tears that loosen and solve without her knowing, without her being conscious of it. The tears come to loosen, to solve. That means to mediate between the worlds of the living and the world of the dead, to make their transition into one another possible, to sense their common ground despite their apparent division, to hold on to this fact, and by considering it, gain comfort. The tears of the Magdalene here at the tomb already blur the vision of the place as a mere external reality. They lead the way inward. The tears, like a net wrapping around the woman, pull her further into herself, so that at the decisive, resolving moment, she has not already lost herself to the place. Fine, but how does she play this? I suddenly thought. How can that be worked out from a practical point of view? And anyway, what do I do if she can't cry, Monica? All those meaningful and timeless aspects I'd been considering were suddenly overrun by the concrete here and now. How is she to communicate this by her acting? She, this young woman whom I didn't know at all. I was suddenly sure that I'd cast the role too superficially, that I had only approached this Italian woman because I was attracted to her. That was all. Again, I saw her before me, remembered that moment when I ran to her car. Just before falling asleep, I remembered a visit to Ingrid Thulin. Thulin was the actress who played Marianne, the young daughter-in-law of the professor in Ingmar Bergman's Wild Strawberries, a film from the late 50s, in which she embarks on a journey with the old man that transforms them both. And perhaps it was less her appearance than that wonderful seriousness, that earnest smile on Thulin's face that Monica's expression reminded me of. A few years earlier, Ingrid Thulin had presented one of her films in Los Angeles. I called Thulin's agent, she was with the Paul Kohner agency in Beverly Hills, and left my number, requesting an interview. By the afternoon, I found a message on my answering machine. It was Ingrid Thulin's voice. For a few seconds, I felt as if I were listening to a voice on a film soundtrack, as if she had filmed a piece of film just for me with her voice. I saw Tulene before me in black and white, Bergman's light on her, as if she were calling from a phone booth at the edge of the grove where the wild strawberries grew. She asked me to meet her at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel the next morning at 10. But when I arrived, they told me that Miss Tulene had left word for me to come straight up to her room. They gave me her room number. Tulene, still in her robe, as if she had woken up only minutes before, opened the door and invited me in. The room was tiny, just enough space for a bed and a small table where my cassette recorder and microphone barely fit. We sat so close that I had to sit rigidly upright, careful not to let my knees touch her robe. We talked about the rehearsal process with Bergman. I asked her how she dealt with scenes where she had to cry. How did she do it? Tulene didn't answer. I felt awkward, thinking I had asked the wrong question. She's going to end the interview, I thought. Then suddenly I saw her crying. I went completely still, sat up straight, completely confused. I must have touched on something terrible, I thought, and apologized, reaching to turn off the recorder. And then, through her tears, I hear her say, "That's how I do it." The next evening, long after dark, shortly before the scheduled rehearsal time, I drove along Mulholland Drive, looking for the address. I saw someone caught in my headlights standing by the roadside. Only in the rearview mirror did I realize it was Monica standing there, waving after me. I stopped and backed up a few yards. "I already opened it," she said as I got out. It wasn't far from her house. She had walked, she said, as she led me through the gate, then down the stone steps to the entrance door, which was still ajar. Part of the house was built into the hillside. We walk along a gallery shrouded in darkness, from which the living space below, connected by a spiral staircase, is clearly visible. As Tyler had announced, it's empty. Down below, a single floor lamp is on, the only light Monica had found. I took a quick look around, but I find nothing in the back rooms, the former bedrooms. On the far side of the living room, behind the sliding glass doors, lay an unlit pool. The garden couldn't be large. I could see the low stone wall at its edge. I knew that beyond it lay the steep drop-off. From here, on smog-free evenings, you could see past the crisscrossing streets all the way to the sea and the lights of Catalina Island. It was 8:15, and Tyler, Newcomb, and Leffler still hadn't arrived. I told Monica I'd been somewhat worried about her yesterday. I don't know why I mentioned it, but I heard myself saying, "Up to Coldwater Canyon, we took the same route." She looked at me, and I saw that earnest smile and suddenly felt exposed. "Where are the others?" she asked, glancing at her watch. For a moment, I was afraid she might think their absence was deliberate, that they weren't coming at all, and that I had arranged to be alone with her in Tyler's house. The thought crossed my mind as I watched her kneel down. She picked up the sheet with her lines and a pencil she'd placed on her bag under the light of the lamp. She looked up at me, waiting for an answer. "No idea. They should have been here by now," I said. "By the way, regarding the scene," I gestured to her sheet, I want to focus the scene entirely on Mary Magdalene. Verses 1 to 10 are out. And we'll start with you, verse 11, I said. I knelt beside her, wanting to show her what I had cut, and pointed to the verses. My arm brushed against her knee before my finger landed on the text. Her knee didn't move. I noticed she had translated the passage on the left half of the sheet into Italian. The first 10 and the last 2 are gone, I said. Did you tell the others? She asked. And again, I had the feeling she suspected I had kept them from coming. Not yet, but we need Newcomb and Leffler anyway. I pointed at verse 12. The angels. She didn't seem convinced. Is this going to work? She asked, as if I were about to get everything wrong. We can rehearse it a bit already, I said. I don't know what's taking them so long. She fell silent and got to her feet. I remained kneeling and gestured toward the pool of light cast by the lamp. Let's just walk through it, mechanically. Just go through the scene, verses 11 to 16. She nodded. The threshold to the tomb is important. We should mark it somehow. She removed her belt and laid the finely crafted silver links smoothly across the middle of the light cone. I stood up, walked 7 steps beyond it, and marked the spot where one of the angels would sit inside the tomb with my jacket. She took off her shoes and placed the pair a short distance beside it. Good, I said. You've come in from here. I gestured toward the wall behind us where the gallery stretched overhead. I saw her hesitate, so I stepped out of the circle of light and into the darkness under the gallery next to the spiral staircase. Here, we start here. Here. She was still hesitating. She picked up the photocopy and pencil from the floor. She was visibly agitated. Slowly, Monica started walking toward me. With her final steps, she turned away and continued walking backwards, as if she wanted to focus on the space we had delineated. We're just going to run through it, Monica, before the others arrive. You're not acting yet. I don't want you to think about emotions or show them. Right now, it's just about the text. What is happening here for you? What does the text say? So you come to the tomb. I walked ahead of her, glancing back as I led the way. She followed me back into the light. Here, to the tomb, you return here. At first, without looking inside, you already know it's empty. You've already seen it empty. But then, in your grief, you bent down to look inside anyway. Monica stood at the threshold and leaned forward slightly. And that small movement, I saw it, but not directly. I caught it from the corner of my eye. That small movement surprised me with its naturalness. For a moment, it was as if I, standing beside her, had disappeared, as if right here and now, there truly was an entrance she had to duck under to see inside. You step inside, maybe 1 or 2 steps, I said, because you need to go a few steps into the antechamber of the tomb. She stepped over the belt and moved a bit closer. There you see the angels. They ask you why you're crying, and you answer. Monica read the line from the King James translation. Because they have taken away my Lord, and I know not where they have laid him. Exactly. And now the text says you turn back. The question is why? She checked her text, and I heard her read the passage softly to herself in Italian. Mentre parlava si voltò. She must have heard something behind her, because now someone has appeared behind you at the entrance, right? She turned, but rather as if she didn't quite understand. I stepped into Tyler's place where Jesus would have stood. You hear a noise behind you, yes? You turn around just as you're standing now. You look at me, but you don't recognize the man. You don't know that it's Jesus. You think he's the gardener. Jesus asks you, why are you crying? Whom are you looking for? You probably see him silhouetted here at the entrance of the tomb. Imagine it like that. Silhouetted? Yes, only as a silhouette, a mere shadow outline. You don't recognize him. But why silhouetted? Here I felt particularly clever because it's Sunday morning and the tomb's entrance faces east. The sun has just risen behind him, so he's standing backlit by that sun. But I don't recognize his voice either, she said. That's right, not even his voice, that's true. You still think he's the gardener. You say, Sir, if thou have borne him hence, tell me where. I signaled for her to continue. She first whispered the line in Italian, Signore, si tu l'hai portato via. Sir, if thou hast borne him hence. She looked up and then didn't go on. At first I thought it was some kind of fear or reverence for the meaning of the line. I thought, she's Italian. Maybe she's heard this phrase often in her childhood. Maybe she even played this scene as a kid at Easter. Maybe it's tied to something she's never forgotten. Who knows? All kinds of things flashed through my mind in those seconds. Or was she embarrassed in front of me? Ashamed of not pronouncing the old words correctly? She was really trembling. I saw the sheet of paper from which she'd read quivering in her tense hand. She held it ready as if she were about to continue reading. Maybe she doesn't have enough light, I thought. I looked at her. No doubt she was trembling. No doubt she was trembling, but not because of the next verse on her page. What's wrong? Do you need more light? Are you feeling sick? She didn't answer, forcing me to step toward her, closing the 2 or 3 feet that separated us. I wanted to reassure her. I put an arm around her and said, just read it without emotion. We're just working through it, step by step, to get our bearings. And again, I saw her trembling, felt the tremor running through her back beneath my arm. I read the next sentence from her sheet. You simply say, Sir, if thou have borne him hence, tell me where thou hast laid him, and I will take him away. And as I spoke the words, she let herself sink to her knees. I realized immediately, partly to slip out of my embrace, partly to make sure it didn't look like an embrace, neither that nor an attempt to break free from one. She sank to her knees and, at the same moment, said, I just need to mark the line. I keep skipping over it. While kneeling, she'd been somewhat facing me first, she turned slightly away and either jotted something down or marked the line. I couldn't quite see. I shifted a little in her direction, away from the gallery, but she was so hunched over the sheet of paper that I couldn't see what she was writing. Here, this is the passage, right? I heard her say, without looking up. I knelt down, trying to see past her shoulder to the passage she was pointing at. She was forcing me, I later realized, to follow her downward, and saw that she had scribbled several words in capital letters at the top margin of the page. She spoke, trying to suppress the tremor in her voice. This is the page you meant, isn't it? Scrawled in hurried handwriting, it read, "He is here. He is watching us. Be careful." "You mean this one, right?" she repeated, pointing to the last word and trying to make her fear sound like annoyance, impatience. She slowly stood up. "Yes," I said, unable to move. I didn't dare turn around. I tried to organize my thoughts. What had happened? Everything slowed down. Who was there? I had closed the front door behind me, or had I? It couldn't be Tyler or any one of the others. These were not people who entered a room silently. In my memory, as if the moment lay further in the past, I saw again the instant when the sheet she held trembled. I'd also heard the sound, the trembling of that sheet, but nothing else. I had not heard anyone enter the house, no door sounds, no footsteps above on the gallery. But then I recalled how she had looked up just as she was about to speak her line, already trembling. I remember her looking up and a change came over her. I can't describe it any other way. Something like fear, profound fear, which I, intending to answer her, mistook for respect. Or suddenly the moment in the parking lot flashed through my mind. The night before, shortly after we'd said goodbye, when I had run back to her car and tapped on our window. She was startled, and for just a second, that same fear was visible. A fright, not at a stranger, but as if she had recognized someone. I stood up, took a step back, and was about to turn around when I saw her eyes pleading with me, begging me for God's sake not to do anything, as if her life depended on my next move. And then, as she repeated her line, "Tell me where thou hast laid him, and I will take him away." And she added, "You address me, you say." She gave me the cue. I'll always remember that. I wanted to turn around. An immense feeling still overwhelms me today. It was at that moment as if I could see, without turning, someone in the darkness behind me, above me, staring down at me from the gallery. But was that even possible? I'd heard no door, and yet I didn't really wonder who was sitting up there. I instinctively knew what had happened. Monica's warning was unmistakable. He is watching us. The fear that had gripped me now knew who was there. My guilty conscience knew. Her husband, I thought, the one who was clearly pursuing, stalking his wife. He must have followed her, some lunatic and obsessively jealous guy she'd somehow gotten involved with. Who knows how far away their house was? Maybe right next door. I had no idea. And now he was sitting up there in the dark behind the gallery railing, eavesdropping on us this very moment, scrutinizing us, waiting to catch us in the act of, "You address me," Monica repeated. "You say, Maria." "Maria, yes." And then I looked down at my script. I wanted to buy time. Buy time for what? I felt that eye upon me, burning into me, and I realized if we stopped now, right now, he would know. He would know it was because of him, and that he's been discovered. Stopping now would tell him we had something to hide from him. But if we continue, play it through, watching every step, Monica might later still say she was merely rehearsing. Because he'll certainly interrogate her, I thought. That's the very least. I wanted to calm myself, but I couldn't. He doesn't know, I had to assume, that she had noticed him up there. but he could hear the fear in her voice. I have to justify her fear, I thought, as if it were part of the scene. Otherwise, he would notice. I have to justify my own fear as well. Keep going. Above all, keep going. I clung to the text. Mary, I said to her. And then, so I address you by your name, Mary, Mary of Magdala. And you recognize me. You recognize the one speaking by his voice. Monica seemed to understand, but then quickly turned away from me, turned her whole body away, and stood with her back to me. I said, no, you don't turn away. You just recognized him. Without turning back, she interrupted me. But it says here, she turned herself. Verse 16. And I checked, now completely confused. It was true. Verse 16, Jesus speaks her name, and Mary, it said, turned herself. For a moment, it was as if the passage of danger, the presence of danger, had twisted everything, even altered the text itself. I'd never noticed this passage before. Could it be? Was I reading it correctly? That makes no sense. Why would you now, at the very moment you're being addressed, and recognize this man, turn around, turn away? Why? I heard her say, the fear in her voice unmistakable. No, she was crying. She turned around once more, now facing me. She wept, her face contorted in pain. She was about to give everything away. The guy would know what was going on. Any second now, he'd break loose. Monica suddenly hurried past me as if she didn't even notice me and cried, "Tell me where thou hast laid him, and I will take him away." I stood there rather helpless as she ran past me, as if she had now decided to betray us, as if she had made up her mind to confront him immediately. But what she was saying, what she was so desperately speaking, was the line from before, Mary Magdalene's line, uttered not while standing before me, but while passing by me. Without thinking, I turned after her instinctively, as if to face the danger behind me, the danger that, provoked by her sudden action, would now strike. I turned around, but I didn't dare look upward. She stood there only 4 or 5 steps away from me, having run past me, fully in her role, as if there truly was something hidden there, the corpse Mary Magdalene was searching for. Hidden behind me, the dead lover she was still weeping for. She stood with her back to me, staring, her gaze searching the darkness, and he was looking down at me. I could feel it. He had me in his sights. He'd know why she was crying, that she was crying under this dreadful tension of being watched, being pursued. I didn't know what to do next. I should cover for her, I thought, say something, anything, to make it seem as though she were still performing, as if it were all just an act. Then I heard her, still turned away, say to me through her tears, "Now you call me, only now." "Maria," I said. And then the crying woman turned around. I will never forget that. It was like that moment I had seen at the very beginning of the rehearsal, that moment when she stooped down to look into the tomb, that moment I'd only caught incidentally out of the corner of my eye, that brief, natural lowering, as if there really was something there. And now Now that she was standing before me, having turned toward me in response to my address, attempting to see me through her tears, but already knowing me, already recognizing me in her very desire to see, all that was evident. I was discovered. I was exposed. I don't know how to describe it any better. I realized, instinctively understood that I was witnessing something, that it wasn't I, but that she, Monica, had shown me something, shown, revealed what had been lost, what had been hidden, hidden like the body she was searching for. It became clear to me that as she passed by me, she had discovered something, a whole sentence that is omitted in the Bible at this point, overlooked, hidden, and now discovered precisely this. And she passed by him. And more than that, because before I turned to her, there would have been a line that read, and both stood there, turned away from each other, before he turned to her and spoke to her, Mary. It became clear to me that Mary Magdalene passes by the man she believes to be the gardener because she is searching for the deceased. She walks past him. Then she hears him behind her. He calls her by name, Mary, and only then does she turn around. That was the she turned herself. And she recognizes him, speaks to him, my master. No, I must say none of this was clear to me, not in that moment when she turned, when she tried to see me through her tears and had already recognized me. That was all. And in all of it lay everything I've thought about since, in that moment. And in that moment, the pressure lifted from me for seconds. So captivated was I by her, by this recognition, by this revelation, that I forgot who was watching us, as if there were no danger. That's how it was in that moment. I must go now, she said. She had stopped crying. It's time. I'm already expected at home. There was great urgency in her voice. And now I thought I heard footsteps, as if someone was moving on the gallery. She went to her belt, quickly picked it up, grabbed her shoes without putting them on, and tossed the jacket to me as she passed. There were footsteps up there. I heard them, ran after her. She slid open the glass door to the garden and went outside. I followed her. It was, so I later realized, as if she had already seen this garden in daylight. We hurried through the darkness until she stopped and ascended a second path, a staircase carved into the hillside, which, winding in several turns, led back to Mulholland Drive. I believe I actually said, "Are you okay?" As if I could have changed the slightest thing about the situation. She nodded at me with her earnest smile. "I'll drive you back," I said. But she raised her hand defensively, immediately continued on, turned left westward along the edge of the road, and called after me, "Go now, drive." I had to pass by the gate. When I saw that it was no longer open, I ran to my car, unlocked it, jumped into the driver's seat, and took off, drove away. I drove to the next turnout, a scenic overlook where two minivans, tourists, were parked. I stopped because I simply couldn't drive on. I felt as if I had survived a catastrophe, some terrible danger. I rolled down the window just a bit to catch some air. The air felt good. The voices of the tourists were audible. Loud German voices arguing about which of the lighted streets below belonged to Hollywood and which to Beverly Hills. Crazy. And that too felt good. I leaned over the passenger seat to lower the other window and saw the note with the address Tyler had given us. I saw the address and knew it immediately. 5 minutes later, I drove back to check. I found the house again, but not the address. Tyler, Newcomb, and Leffler, as I learned that night, had been waiting somewhere else, much farther west. So I don't know whose magician's house Monica had led me to. I never saw Monica Esposito again. She never returned to Daniel Mann's acting class. The old director, it turned out, had, like us, neither address nor phone number on her. It wasn't until years later, when I was working on my first books, that I came across the passage, almost by chance, John 20:11-16, the scene that had never been performed. Yet one that I now realized I possessed a nearly physical knowledge of, a knowledge recalled and felt more deeply with every verse I reread. I remembered it physically, through the body, matter, materia, in the body, for I had experienced the scene physically, not merely imagined it, but enacted it. In the course of blocking out the rehearsal scene, since I had actually put myself into the scene, something had been revealed. But it was not just the act of staging the material that had decisively led to this. I believe that above all, it was that situation of tension I described, the awareness of being watched, the time span in which I knew myself to be exposed to an unknown gaze, the eye, to a danger that forced me into heightened vigilance. Without the tension under which we were operating, without that tension pressing on us, I would never have been alert enough to register every step, to rediscover, with Monica's help, the lost verse, the missing, concealed sentence. And without the experience of danger, I would have lacked the visceral, emotional foundation for a memory that still lives on today, one that has only grown in significance, has become symbolic. That the menacing eye I felt on me that night became fused in my memory with the content of the scene, especially upon rereading it later and every time since, endowed the unseen with something numinous, with a divinely dangerous, unpredictable quality. But it already possessed that back then, even during the rehearsal, when it forced me to abandon my personal ideas and fantasies about that evening, and certainly about Monica, and to focus narrowly, gripped by anguish and fear, on the next steps, on what was essentially new. In this respect, it was not I who directed that night, but the unknown presence. Or perhaps it was Monica as the anima who made me aware of the other one, of the other. I, at any rate, was no director here. I was part of the scene, part of what was unfolding. Something was happening to me. For what do I remember as so decisive in that scene? What was discovered and what has only grown in meaning over the years? It was Monica's passing by me, Mary Magdalene's passing by this man, this stranger whom she takes for the gardener. That was the moment that had been uncovered. The movement the biblical text skips over, assumes, implies, but leaves unspoken. It reminds me of certain neorealist films where crucial events, such as a murder or a fatal accident, are omitted, left out, skipped over. We see only what happens afterward. The climax is omitted, and instead gathered in its after effects, so that the transformative moment is rediscovered in what has already been changed. I say that in this omitted sentence, in Mary Magdalene's passing by Jesus, the crucial negative climax of that passage is skipped over. Let me lead you back to this moment. Mary Magdalene, she comes to the tomb. It is empty. She turns back, goes to the disciples, turns again, goes back to the tomb. The angels speak to her. Why are you weeping? She turns again. This is the third turning. She sees someone, but does not recognize him, even though he speaks to her, Jesus. And now comes the moment the Bible skips over. Mary Magdalene walks past him. There must have been a moment during this passing by when both Jesus and Mary Magdalene stood turned away from each other. He was still looking into the tomb where she, who just passed by him, had stood but a moment ago. And she, with her back to him, was still searching for the body of that dead beloved. They stood turned away from each other. And what does that mean? What does it mean to me? For whom do they stand turned away, unseen by each other? God and humanity, this is the moment, no longer see each other. They stand divided, set apart. But now something turns. For it is only Mary Magdalene's passing by that makes Jesus turn. He must have turned when he spoke her name, Mary. Here, only at this naming, a baptism, does the Bible resume and tell us that Mary Magdalene turned. It is the fourth and decisive time that she turns. And in this turning, she's being transformed as the having turned one, as Greek, straphesa. That is, she's being transformed from someone who no longer knew him, who, living, sought only the dead, who therefore was dead in regard to him, transformed into someone who recognizes him. She gives birth to him a second time. For it is only here, in the eyes of this flesh and blood woman who sees him, that he comes into the world now as the risen one. And thus, Mary Magdalene herself becomes a risen one at this moment of becoming conscious. But he too is transformed in this moment of recognition. He's no longer the dark God who does not reveal himself, who stood as a stranger before her, then turned away from her. But now he is the recognized one. And only in this moment of being recognized is he resurrected for Mary Magdalene as well. Jesus himself, this is so important, and this is precisely what is omitted, skipped over in this passage. Jesus himself is a having turned one, straphes, one who has turned. He turns even before Mary Magdalene turns. She compels him to, one might say. How? Through her missing the mark, through her passing him by. She compels him to turn, or he allows himself to be compelled. But how does she walk forth from the tomb? She walks searching, all feeling. And in this, she remains connected to the goal of her search, even in her missing the mark, even in error, in missing the goal itself. God transforms, this image tells us, through our search for him. Yes, even through our passing him by. He transforms in order to turn toward us in his longing to see, that is, to be consciously perceived. The fourth turning of Mary Magdalene, the decisive one, is the Magdalene second. This is the second of turning, which differs from the Orpheus second, in that Mary Magdalene is one who was called to return, called to turn. She does not look back like Orpheus. The Magdalene second is the second of recognition. Man and God become conscious of each other again, once more. Savingly conscious, baptizingly conscious, out of the water of the unconscious, out of death, each pulling the other forth, one newborn in the other. Mary Magdalene sees and is seen, and he likewise, he sees and is seen. Cognoscit sicut cognatus est. Similar to that passage in the first letter to the Corinthians, where it says, "But then shall I know, even as also I am known." That scene, then the rehearsal of Mary Magdalene at the tomb, now completed by this missing part, presents the entire drama of transformation. From a state of total turned awayness, estrangement, separation, division of both, of God and man, of matter and spirit, a state of being ripped apart. The scene comes to a turning, yes, to a turning toward each other. One is now in the eye of the other, one recognized, contained within the one, a complete transformation.